in the heart of a vast, untouched forest. Where ancient trees towered like silent sentinels, there was a sanctuary that had long been forgotten by the outside world. The sanctuary was a refuge for wildlife, a place where the broken, the lost, and the injured could heal. It was known only to those who truly sought it, a sanctuary untouched by time, where the hum of nature's pulse could be felt in every breeze, and where the mysterious rhythms of the earth seemed to breathe alongside the living creatures. For years, the sanctuary had remained a place of quiet healing. Its walls were the thick canopies of towering pines and oaks, the moss-covered ground that softened every step, and the still waters of a stream that meandered through the forest like a whispered secret. Inside its borders, animals roamed freely, cared for by the few who knew of its existence. The humans who had built the sanctuary had long since disappeared, leaving behind only traces of their work-rusted fences, empty huts, and pathways slowly being overtaken by nature's reclaiming hand. In the center of this sanctuary was a small clearing where sunlight dappled through the leaves, casting a serene glow across the forest floor. It was here that a lone horse, once a thoroughbred champion, now lived in quiet solitude. His name was Ash, and he had once raced across the country's most prestigious tracks, his hooves pounding the earth in a rhythm of victory. But the thrill of the race was long gone. The injuries, the exhaustion, and the relentless demands of the sport had taken their toll. Now, Ash roamed the forest like a shadow of his former self, a creature who had known glory, but now found peace only in the stillness of the trees. Yet, despite the peace, there was something in the air, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. It was not the change of seasons or the slow crawl of time, but something more. A sense of tension hung in the air, like the faintest whisper of a coming storm. For weeks, Ash had been feeling it as stirring deep within his bones, a sense of unease that gripped him when the sun dipped low and the shadows of the forest grew long. He had heard it in the rustling of the leaves, felt it in the way the wind brushed against his coat. There was something out there, something moving through the forest with purpose, and it wasn't the usual wildlife. It wasn't the wolves, the deer, or the coyotes that frequented these woods. No, this was different. One evening, as the sky turned to shades of purple and gold, Ash stood at the edge of the clearing, his ears flicking nervously at the sounds beyond the tree line. There, just out of sight, something moved. The underbrush rustled, the trees whispered. Ash's muscles tensed as he stood perfectly still, his breath shallow. He had never been one to fear the unknown, but tonight, the forest felt different. The sounds of the night seemed muted, as though the creatures of the woods had gone silent in anticipation of something. Suddenly, a shadow darted through the trees, just beyond the edge of the clearing. Ash's heart pounded. He knew that feeling. It was the unmistakable presence of another horse, one that moved with a grace, a purpose, that was unlike any animal he had encountered before. And then the scent reached him, a familiar, bitter smell of sweat and leather. The scent of a racehorse. In the darkness, Ash could make out the outline of the newcomer, tall, slender, with a coat that gleamed silver under the dimming light. He was no stranger to Ash. In fact, Ash had raced against him many years ago. His name was Thunder, and he was a legend in the world of racing, fast, unyielding, and untamed. He had been one of Ash's fiercest competitors on the track, always just a breath ahead. But unlike Ash, Thunder had never been retired. His career had ended abruptly, long before Ash had known that peace in the forest. Now, as Thunder moved deeper into the clearing, Ash felt a strange sensation, a wave of recognition mixed with something else, something raw. Thunder was here not just as a shadow from the past, but as a sign, as a challenge, one that would bring Ash's buried memories rushing back to the surface. As the two horses locked eyes, the tension between them was palpable. Thunder's powerful muscles rippled beneath his coat. There was something in his presence that seemed to pull at Ash, a force that stirred the dormant hunger for competition within him. It was as though Thunder had come to remind him of what he once was and what he could still become. But before Ash could move, the air shifted again. The rustling of the leaves grew louder, more frantic. Thunder's ears flicked back, and his body tensed. He turned, his gaze scanning the perimeter of the clearing. Something was coming. The first sound was subtle, a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the earth. Then a flash of movement, too fast for the eye to follow, broke through the trees. Ash's heart raced. It was not another animal, at least not in the way he had feared. What emerged from the shadows was a figure, tall and dark, clothed in a weathered cloak. The figure moved with unsettling silence, gliding between the trees like a specter. Ash's instincts screamed at him to flee, but something held him in place. Thunder, too, seemed frozen, caught in a silent battle between flight and fight. The figure moved closer, and Ash could see now that it was not a human, but something more, a figure wrapped in shadow, its face hidden beneath a hood. It moved with an unnatural grace, its steps echoing in the quiet of the forest. Ash's breath caught in his chest as the figure reached the edge of the clearing and extended a hand palm open toward Thunder. The horse recoiled, a sharp snort escaping him. But then, as if against his will, Thunder stepped forward. The figure's hand closed around Thunder's mane, and for a moment, Ash saw it, something shifting in the air, something that felt like a pull, an invisible thread between the figure and Thunder. The connection between them was unmistakable. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the figure vanished back into the shadows, taking Thunder with it. The forest fell into complete silence. Ash was left standing alone in the clearing, his mind racing. Had he imagined it? Or had the past come back to claim the present? The sensation of unease that had gripped him was now a certainty. Thunder was gone, and whatever had taken him was still out there, moving through the forest with intent. Ash stood there, rooted to the spot. He could feel it now, the pull of something greater, something darker, something that would force him to confront the one thing he had avoided for so long. He had a choice to make. The forest, the sanctuary, had given him peace, but it had also reminded him of what he was. And now, as the night deepened, Ash knew he would have to face the very thing he had left behind, racing the competition and the unknown forces that governed both. With a final glance toward the shadowed tree line, Ash stepped forward into the night, knowing that whatever awaited him would change everything. The redemption race had begun. Ash's hooves echoed in the stillness of the forest as he moved through the underbrush. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness, but his instincts guided him with quiet certainty. Every step he took felt heavier than the last, as though the forest itself was pressing in on him, whispering forgotten stories and ancient secrets. The air was thick with tension, and the weight of the unseen force that had taken Thunder felt like an invisible burden upon his shoulders. The moonlight filtered through the canopy in soft beams, casting an eerie glow on the forest floor. Ash's coat gleamed in the dim light, his muscles taut with anticipation. He could feel the presence of something or someone watching from the shadows. He quickened his pace, his senses heightened, the pounding of his heart mingling with the rhythmic sound of his hooves. Each crack of a twig beneath his feet, each rustle of leaves made his pulse race with the feeling of being followed. There was no denying it, no Thunder's disappearance was no accident. Whoever or whatever had taken him was not just a force of nature. It was deliberate, calculated, and it wasn't the first time it had happened. As Ash moved deeper into the forest, the dense trees began to open up, revealing a narrow clearing. At the center of it stood an ancient oak, its gnarled roots twisting up from the earth like the hands of some forgotten god. A faint, almost imperceptible light flickered at the base of the tree, and Ash's heart skipped a beat. It was there, but something was different about him. Thunder was no longer the proud, untamed racehorse that Ash had once known. His coat was dull, his eyes clouded with a distant, hollow look. He stood motionless, as if rooted to the ground, his body trembling ever so slightly. Ash approached cautiously, his hooves soft against the earth. The air felt thick with magic, an energy that pulsed through the very ground beneath him. His nostrils flared as he inhaled the strange scent of the place, a mixture of earth. He reached out, but stopped just short of Thunder. The horse's eyes flicked toward him, but there was no recognition. No spark of the fierce competitor Ash had once raced alongside. And then, with a start, Ash realized the truth. Thunder wasn't just a victim of the forest's strange hold. He was a part of it. Whatever force had claimed Thunder had altered him, changed him into something else entirely. The horse was no longer the same creature Ash had known. He was an extension of the forest, a pawn in a game far older than either of them. Suddenly, a low growl reverberated from the shadows. Ash's body stiffened, his ears swiveling as the sound grew louder, closer. A flash of movement broke the stillness. A dark, sinuous form emerged from the trees. It was a creature unlike anything Ash had ever seen. Its body was long, its legs slender, and its eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light. Its movements were quick and fluid, like the wind itself, and it moved with a predatory grace. The creature's gaze locked onto Ash, and for a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Ash felt a chill run through him, an ice-cold terror that gripped his heart. He had seen predators in the wild before: wolves, coyotes, even bears, but this was different. This creature was not of the natural world. It was something born of darkness, something that didn't belong in the sanctuary. It moved closer, its eyes narrowing as it studied Ash with a calculating intelligence. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, the silence deafening. The creature's fur bristled, and Ash could see the glint of sharp teeth beneath its lips. It was a predator, yes, but it was not hunting for food. It was hunting for something much darker. It was hunting for Ash himself. In that moment, Ash knew that Thunder's fate was sealed. He was no longer the one being chased in this race. Ash was. The creature was coming for him. And if he didn't act, if he didn't escape, he too would be consumed by the same fate that had taken his old rival. Ash's mind raced. The forest was alive with energy, but it was not his ally. The air pulsed with an unnatural force, like the beating of some ancient heart, and every instinct he had screamed at him to flee. The creature took a step forward, its sharp claws scraping the earth. Ash's body tensed, ready to spring into action. He could feel the weight of the past, of the races he had run, of the glory he had once known, all collapsing in on him. But something else stirred inside him, a flicker of defiance, a surge of the very spirit that had driven him to win countless races. This wasn't just about survival. This was a race, a test, a chance to redeem himself, to prove that he was not just a broken animal lost to time. The forest had taken Thunder, but it would not take him. He would run again. He would escape. With a surge of power, Ash bolted forward, his hooves pounding the earth like a storm unleashed. The creature snarled, leaping after him, its movements fluid and swift. Ash pushed himself harder, his body stretched to its limits, his lungs burning with the effort. He could feel the creature gaining on him, could hear the rustling of its movements just behind him. He was no longer in the forest. He was in a race that stretched beyond time, a race with no finish line. Ash's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't slow. The path before him twisted and turned, narrowing into dense underbrush that slowed the creature's pursuit. The trees around him seemed to part, offering him just enough space to weave through. The dark figure behind him was relentless, but Ash's determination grew with every stride. He was faster than he had been in years, fueled by the desperate need to survive, to escape the pull of the forest's dark heart. In one final burst of speed, Ash reached the edge of the sanctuary, the clearing where the forest opened up to the world beyond. He heard the creature's howl behind him, its frustration growing as it was left behind in the thicket. Ash didn't look back. He didn't need to. He had crossed the threshold out of the darkness and back into the light. But as he slowed, his breath ragged, and his body trembling from the strain. Ash felt it, the pull, the sensation of something still watching him. The forest had not let him go entirely. It had merely relented for now. As Ash walked into the world beyond the sanctuary, the winds of the forest seemed to whisper his name. He knew that this was not the end. The redemption race was only beginning. Ash stood at the edge of the sanctuary, his body trembling from the effort, his heart still racing. The cool night air wrapped around him like a shroud, but it did little to calm the frantic pulse that echoed in his veins. He had escaped the clutches of that strange, dark creature, but he could still feel its presence, a shadow lingering just beyond his awareness. The forest had not released him, it had merely shifted, like a game played by an ancient force that relished in the chase. For a moment, Ash simply stood still, his chest rising and falling with each labored breath. He glanced behind him, toward the sanctuary, the place where the trees whispered and the darkness lurked. The path he had followed to this point had been long and fraught with danger, and though he had outrun one peril, he knew there would be others waiting for him if he ventured too far back. The sound of distant hooves echoed in the night. Sharp and sure, there were others out there, still racing, still following the call of the forest's depths. Thunder's spirit had been consumed, but Ash could sense that the forest was not finished with its twisted game. It wanted something more, something darker. Ash shifted his weight, his muscles sore from the chase. He looked ahead, where the forest thinned out into open grasslands. The path was no longer obstructed by trees or thick brush. It was wide open, free of the suffocating canopy that had made him feel so small, so insignificant. But it was still just a path, a race, a test. A sudden rustle from behind made Ash spin around. For a moment his breath caught in his throat, his ears pricking up at the sound. He tensed, ready to spring back into action, but then a familiar figure emerged from the shadows, a smaller form, with a lithe build and a glint of gold in the moonlight. It was another horse, not unlike him in size and build, but with a coat that shimmered like sunlight against the night. The horse moved slowly, cautiously, as if unsure of its place in the world. Ash's heart skipped. He recognized the spirit in the animal's movements, the same wild energy he had once known. It was another creature of the forest, an old companion, one who had not been lost to the dark forces yet. The two horses stared at each other for a moment. Ash could feel the weight of the connection, the shared bond of freedom and survival. He didn't know where this new horse had come from, but something inside him urged him to approach, to offer his company in the face of whatever might come next. The new horse hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward. The wind swirled around them, sending a chill through Ash's coat. The moon was high now, casting a silver glow over the vast expanse ahead. For a fleeting second, Ash wondered if he could outrun whatever hunted them. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just about running anymore. The forest had been a test. The dark creature, the twisted magic hit, was all part of something much larger, something older. And Ash understood now that there was no escaping it. The forest had claimed Thunder, but it had also marked Ash. And if he didn't face it, if he didn't confront the heart of the forest, then there would be no end to the chase. The two horses stood side by side, looking out at the vast moonlit plains before them. In the distance, there was a whisper sound that didn't belong to the natural world. It was a cry, haunting and far away, yet unmistakable. It was the same cry Ash had heard before, the one that had called him into the depths of the forest, the one that had led him into the trap. The dark creature, it was calling again. But now Ash didn't feel the familiar wave of fear. Instead, he felt something else's sense of resolve. The creature had been hunting him, yes, but it had also been testing him. It had wanted him to run, to be consumed by the chase. But now Ash realized that the only way to truly escape was to face the heart of the forest, to run toward the source of the darkness, not away from it. The new horse beside him tossed its head, as though it, too, had heard the call. It seemed to understand the urgency, the purpose. Together, the two horses moved forward, their hooves striking the earth in unison. They weren't running from the darkness anymore, they were running toward it. As they moved toward the heart of the forest, the air grew colder, the trees denser, the path grew narrower, and the silence grew heavier. There was no longer the sound of creatures stirring in the underbrush. The forest had quieted, as though it, too, was holding its breath. And then, as they reached the edge of a dense thicket, the darkness parted before them, revealing a strange clearing bathed in an unnatural, silvery glow. In the center of the clearing stood a figure, something neither human nor animal, something that seemed to flicker in and out of reality, its form shifting like smoke caught in a breeze. It was the source of the pull, the thing that had drawn Ash in, the creature that had taken Thunder. Ash's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know what this thing was, but he could feel its power, its ancient presence. It wasn't just a predator. It was something older than the forest itself, a force that fed on fear and power. The new horse beside Ash didn't hesitate. It stepped forward, its coat glowing in the eerie light. Ash followed, his hooves steady on the earth, his gaze never wavering from the shifting figure in front of him. In that moment, Ash understood what he had to do. He wasn't just running for survival anymore. He was running to confront the source of all that darkness, all the twisted forces that had claimed so many before him. He had to challenge it, to break free of its grip. The race had led him here, to this moment of truth. The two horses closed the distance. The figure before them flickered again, and in an instant, the clearing was silent. The wind stilled, and the earth beneath them seemed to hum with energy. It was time. Ash took one last deep breath, and with a powerful leap, he charged forward into the unknown, into the heart of the forest's darkness, where the true race, the race for redemption, would be decided.